Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Father Brown and the Bell that waited for rain, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K. Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Sound of Silence. It was dawn, the kind suffocated by a chorus of furious thunder, when the agonizing scream pierced through the damp morning air, shivering through the sleepy village of Fairwood like a malicious gust. In the dim glow of a guttering candle, the stately portrait of Lady Evangeline seemed to watch as villagers rushed toward the ancient stone manor, their breathless whispers dripped with horror, weaving a tapestry of chaos that confounded the thin veil of peace. The church bells tolled mournfully, though they had never sounded so eerily dissonant, echoing the wrongness that now blanketed Lady Evangeline's locked study, where she lay slumped over her mahogany desk. Father Brown stood off to the side, his bespectacled eyes narrowed behind a thoughtful brow, taking in the extravagance of the room with its heavy drapes and glinting baubles. Yet for him, the rush of opulence bore witness to a darker underbelly, the exquisite collection of trinkets and tomes now tainted by death's cruel hand. He caught the smell of burnt candles mixed with a more sinister undertone, a slight hint of bitter almonds that wedged itself between his senses like a gaping chasm. His heart raced. The woman was purportedly of sound mind, yet how could she die alone in such a strange silence? Intrigued and unsettled, he edged closer, his instincts flaring with a mix of curiosity and unease. Surrounding the manor were whispers of discontent and speculation as the doctor, a young, nervous fellow with spectacles sliding down his nose, emerged. The crowd hushed as he recoiled, shocked by the sight within. "Locked from the inside," he muttered, voice wavering, "and yet she is gone." As he spoke, Father Brown's attention snagged for a fleeting moment on a letter, a fragile sheet, fluttering from its resting place among the curtains, as if grasping for freedom, only to be halted by the corpse's weighty finality. Every eye in the crowd was glued to the doctor, but Father Brown's mind was more attuned to the particulars. His gaze momentarily strayed to the young maid, Mary, whose tearful gaze darted about the sea of onlookers, her fingers nervously twisting an apron that had gone white with the soil of a diligent life. "She was always in there, said she'd found something she ought not," Mary breathed, eyes wide and brimming. Before anyone could respond, the door to the study creaked open, inviting in the noxious smell that accompanied Lady Evangeline's demise. With morbid curiosity, it was as though the room itself had exhaled a secret. "Useless charms brought her nothing," hissed a voice behind Father Brown, compelling him to turn. It was Avery, Lady Evangeline's lifelong companion, an older woman with sharp features akin to a drawn dagger. She obsessed over her curios. She thought them wiser than people. She spat, disdain dripping from her words. The old adage of arrogance before blind devotion danced through Father Brown's mind, yet he was drawn more to the texture of her fabric, the shimmering brooch of a worried butterfly pinned to her chest, more than any veiled grudge. Lady Evangeline possessed many secrets, didn't she? Father Brown mused, probing gently, his eyes fixed on the brooch that seemed to glimmer in the dim light. Even more than her treasures? Avery stiffened, the plumage of her pride ruffled. Secrets. What she did was condemn herself to isolation through her wealth. The unyielding candor of her accusation flared in the air as thunder rattled the village once more, an angry overture mourning the loss of Lady Evangeline's laughter. Yet Father Brown, with the slightest of smiles, hints of mirth edging his pale features, could have sworn he detected a flicker of guilt reflected in her darkened eyes. The distant creak of the floorboards prompted him to turn again. A figure stepped toward the study, cast in a cloak of shadows, like a slippery phantom. It was Dr. Mortimer, a local medic, known less for his aptitude than for the arrogance he wore like a shroud. "Everything can be explained," he announced more to himself than the spectators gathered about, drumming his fingers restlessly. Her extravagant lifestyle must have caught up to her. But the sudden intensity of his voice sent an unexpected chill through the gathering, as if confessions of a more sinister nature were trembling on his tongue. Unfazed by the speculation, Father Brown observed the doctor's movements. There was something hurried about the way Mortimer pinched the top of his collar, and when the physician took a step closer to the door, it felt as though Father Brown glimpsed an untrustworthy heart beneath the facade of respectable authority. "Doctor, did you last speak to her?" Father Brown inquired, the calmness of his voice contrasting against the storm raging outside, both physical and emotional. Mortimer's features twisted, as if torn between duty and revelation, yet he steadfastly claimed her will was in order, with an abruptness that shattered the air. But the look behind his eyes revealed another layer. Had something wicked been afoot in that seemingly clear transaction of power? Father Brown stepped back, satisfied but troubled. He felt marionettes being pulled by strings unseen, every villager embroidered with a motive for the chaos, now wrapping the community like grotesquely embroidered fabric. Just as he sensed he was closing in, a loud thud from inside the study jolted the air, the echo stinging with fresh terror. The door swung open. All eyes turned to see Mary, trembling as she let fall a crimson envelope from her grasp, an envelope unmistakably stained with damp, dark marks akin to splatters of paint or blood. She had been clutching it to her chest as if it were a bar of gold, and on conscience, Father Brown stepped forward to retrieve it. But just as he reached for it, thunder cracked above, and, within the ensuing tumult, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, revealing not just the chaos of emotions, but also the words scrawled in the envelope's cruel embrace. "Find me if you dare." As the echo rang through the village, Father Brown understood. Whatever darkness dwelled within this folded parchment, it mirrored the human heart more than the laws of man. Something insidious had been awakened, and in the wake of that dreadful proclamation, the villagers were left standing at the precipice of horror, where whispered secrets and thinly veiled lies would become the stuff of legend. Father Brown's heart quickened with timing, so aligned with fate itself. It was yet another mystery unfolding, even as the storm raged on. And in this cacophony of doubts and revelations, he could almost swear he heard the echoes of laughter, distant, ghostly, and trailing into silence. Chapter 2. The Whispering Confessor. The frantic patter of rain turned to a deluge, as if the heavens themselves wept in agony, drowning the village of Fairwood in a veil of despair. A flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating a figure standing at the edge of the churchyard, a silhouette framed against the pounding rhythm of thunder. Father Brown squinted through the sheets of rain, struggling to decipher the scene unfolding in the tempestuous gloom. It wasn't the familiar faces of the villagers that drew his attention, but the frail man, shivering in a coat 2 sizes too large, who appeared to be battling more than just the elements. His wide, terrified eyes seemed to dart around frantically, grasping for some unseen anchor in the chaos. "Father Brown," the man croaked, voice cracking like dried twigs. He staggered toward the priest, his footfalls silent against the muddied cobblestones, the urgency of his breath palpable with every shivering inhale. I must speak to you. It's about Lady Evangeline's murder." The statement hung heavy in the air, a thunderclap mirroring the man's abrupt arrival, and Father Brown's mind snapped to attention as he took in the stranger's disheveled appearance, a stark contrast to the chaotic solemnity of the atmosphere. The candle flames flickered against the shadows, dancing wildly as if possessed by the urgency of the moment. "Calm yourself, my friend," Father Brown murmured, his rich, deliberate tone cutting through the tempest like a lighthouse guiding a lost ship. "What can you tell me? Speak plainly." The man's eyes widened, and through frantic breaths, he stammered, "I know who did it. I heard their voice." He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder, as if fearing a phantom might loom just beyond the veil of the storm. "But you mustn't tell anyone. They will come for me." A sinister chill raced down Father Brown's spine, not just from the man's words, but from the gravity of his demeanor. This was no mere observation, but a harbinger of impending doom. "Tell me then," Father Brown urged gently, "who do you know to be connected with this crime? There is danger here, and the only way to dispel it is through the light of truth." "Mortimer," he spat, jerking a finger through the air. "The doctor, he doesn't speak how you'd expect. His kindness is feigned. He's got many secrets. I overheard things when I was cleaning the office. I shouldn't have been there, but I heard. He had a quarrel with her about her treasures, things that were supposed to help." "Help?" Father Brown echoed, a frown furrowing his brow. This new insight unfolded like an ancient scroll bearing the rust of untold ages. "What do you mean by help?" "They were cursed." The man lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, swaying dangerously as the wind whipped around him. "The artifacts she collected. They hold power, they say. Mortimer wanted them gone, said they invited trouble." He started to retreat into the shadows, every instinct sharp with fear and urgency. Lightning zigzagged across the night sky, cloaking the scene in a ghastly glow. Before Father Brown could inquire further, the figure stumbled backward, murmurings of dread quaking through his lips. "I must go. They'll find me. Beware, Father. Beware the bells." With those cryptic words, he vanished into the night, swallowed by the fog that rolled in like a spectral tide, leaving only the echo of his warning hanging in the air like a ghostly specter of dread. Caught between disbelief and dread, Father Brown stood rooted, a myriad of thoughts spiraling in his mind. The mention of the bells pulsed through him, entwining with the ethereal energy of the storm surrounding him. Shaking himself from reverie, he dashed toward the church, seeking refuge from the oppressive atmosphere. The ancient wooden doors creaked open, and he stepped inside, the air heavy with incense and the remnants of whispered prayers. Within these hallowed walls, the storm, outside, felt a world away, even as the tolling of the church bell reverberated through, a mournful sound that cut at his heart like ice. Resuming his contemplation of the man's words, he considered the weight of the accusations levied against Dr. Mortimer. The doctor's stormy temperament surfaced in his mind, a man prodigal with respectability, yet drenched in uncertainty. But fatherhood taught him that darkness often lingers beneath the veneer of certainty. As he moved to the front of the nave, lost in thought, he noticed the gleam of something half hidden beneath a pew, an envelope, damp but inscribed with a carefully crafted crest he recognized as that of Lady Evangeline. With nimble fingers, Father Brown pried it up, the ink smudged yet familiar, and carefully peeled it open, the letter's contents unfurling like the unveiling of secrets long kept at bay. "Dear Mortimer," it read, the writing flowing eloquently but marred by the rain. "The treasures I have gathered possess greatness. Entreat not upon their power, for only calamity shall follow those who covet beyond their station." The meaning behind those words pricked at the back of Father Brown's mind, every twist of the letter whispering of significance too profound to ignore. He needed to speak to the doctor, required clarification. But first, the cloak of shadows and mists needed to be lifted. Just as the eerie atmosphere began to settle, a sudden cacophony of strident sounds erupted outside. A scream towering above the drums of the storm, a surge of adrenaline shot through Father Brown as he raced toward the door, only to find Mary, the maid, standing wide-eyed at the threshold, blood staining her apron. "Father," she cried through fractured breaths. "They found him. He's dead." And with that, the storm's fury intensified, as if nature itself was auguring tragedy. Father Brown caught a glint amid Mary's trembling grasp. Another crimson envelope rested against the damp fabric, a chilling premonition coiling in his gut. Lightning illuminated her fearful eyes, and the church bells rang out, their discord marking an unfolding calamity that now beckoned him into further darkness. With heart racing and the night electrified with portent, Father Brown stepped forward, pulse quickening as he reached for the second envelope, knowing with dread that whatever lay within would propel him deeper into the maze of hidden motives and trembling truths. As he tore the envelope open, a draught swept through the church, snatching the candlelight and leaving nothing but shadows swirling around them, a harbinger of the perilous revelations ahead. Chapter 3. The Clock That Stopped. The unnerving silence that followed the scream was shattered by the ominous tolling of the church bells, their deep resonance echoing across the village of Fairwood like the foreboding of some ancient prophecy. Father Brown's heart raced as he stepped out into the tempest, rain lashing at his face, the world reduced to a harsh panorama of lightning flashes. With urgency fueling his movements, he hurried to the study where Mortimer's body lay, the very air growing thick with unveiled horror as Mary stood still, a ghost trapped in her own fear. He found it, an untimely stillness, an air as suffocating as the heavy darkness draping over the estate. The study door swung open, revealing a room illuminated by flickering candlelight that danced nervously in the overhead gloom. There, lying sprawled across the ornate Persian rug, was Dr. Mortimer, his eyes wide open in eternal surprise, as if he had glimpsed the unfathomable truth seconds before the end. Time had stopped for him, but strangely enough, the clock on the mantel remained frozen at precisely 11 o'clock. Father Brown's keen eyes quickly scanned the room, registering the jarring juxtaposition of vibrant artistry contrasted against the body at rest. He felt that the clock held more than mere time. It was a portal to understanding the sinister dance of fate that had unfolded. "Did you witness anything, Mary?" Father Brown asked, his steady gaze locking onto her as she trembled at the doorway, the dim light casting shadows across her pale face. "No, father," she whispered, her voice frail amidst the roaring storm. "But I found him like this, and the moment I rang the bell, I felt watched. He was meant to leave for dinner. I heard him mention an appointment." "An appointment?" Father Brown interjected, suddenly alert. "With whom?" Mary's gaze faltered, glancing into the corners of the dim study, fearing the walls themselves might harbor secrets. "He said he was expecting someone important. A lady friend, perhaps. It slipped my mind, but it was something they were going to discuss, something that could change everything." As doubt rippled through her words, Father Brown approached the clock, his fingers brushing delicately against the smooth, cold surface. Unyielding, the hands of the clock remained pointed toward 11 o'clock, a time that gripped him with unsettling significance. "Why does it stop here?" he wondered aloud, inching closer to deductive reasoning. What was to occur exactly at this hour? Mary shifted uncomfortably. He had spoken about needing to be careful with her jewels, claimed it could expose certain matters of consequence. But I thought it just the ramblings of a distressed man. What jewels? Was he referring to Lady Evangeline's treasures? The question hung in the air, charged with potential revelation. "Yes, those cursed trinkets too vile to even touch," she whispered, casting her eyes downward, as if fearing retribution from unknown forces. He seemed obsessed with them, as if they held a power that could draw forth darkness. Father Brown's mind equated shadows with motives. How many were entwined in the fate of that cursed collection? He pivoted to the desk, where a ledger lay half open, a plume of black ink drying under a weighty pressure. "Let us unveil this ledger, my dear Mary." He beckoned her over, his voice soothing, despite the chaos. Murderous rage often runs skittish, and time has a way of revealing truth, little by little. As she approached, the air thick with dampness and dread, he began to notice irregularities, subtle markings, and non-standard notations. One entry stood out, a series of appointments noted down in a careful yet frantic scrawl. "The day of Lady Evangeline's demise," he murmured, tracing his finger along the page. "Mortimer had a scheduled meeting with Lord Ashby at 11 o'clock. This is no mere coincidence." Mary's eyes widened, her lips formed a silent gasp as Father Brown's intuition churned. "Did you see Lord Ashby before you found Mortimer?" "No, Father," she stammered, backing away. It was too stormy to tell who was coming or going, but many have been in and out of the estate these last few days, inquiring about Lady Evangeline's possessions. "I must speak to Lord Ashby," he declared, feeling the weight of urgency pressing upon him like the storm outside, and yet another chilling pause slithered through the room as he noticed a glimmer beneath the crimson fabric of Mortimer's jacket. He carefully unbuttoned it and reached inside, revealing a small velvet pouch, nearly weightless. As he loosened the drawstrings, a cascade of glinting stones spilled forth, jewels that sparkled like malevolent stars. "Did you know he carried these?" Mary gasped, as the diamonds and rubies tumbled forth, each stone an accusation against the corpse. Father Brown's mind raced. The jewels were evidence of the conflict surrounding Mortimer, yet who had really taken them? Mortimer was either a thief or a fool, perhaps both. "No," he murmured, heart heavy with understanding. He was not merely a servant of his craft. He wore secrets on his sleeve, and now it seems they were the very fibers that strangled him. As time loomed ominously beyond the clock, a furious knock echoed at the door, punctuating their revelations and shattering the spell of quiet contemplation. Father Brown turned grimly to Mary, their shared confusion, a tangible force. What fate awaited them now? "Stay here," he instructed, with calm authority. And as he approached the door, the air grew thick with unspoken tension. Just as he placed his hand on the handle, a sudden gunshot rang out. A sharp, violent report swallowed by the storm, sending a ripple of chaos through the house, as if the very walls quaked in fear. Father Brown hesitated, teetering between the threshold of sanity and tumult, and with a deep breath, he flung open the door, stepping into the unknown. The storm raged unceasingly behind him, and as he caught sight of the looming figure just beyond the threshold, silhouetted against the fury of rain and shadows, the blood heart of the mystery pounded against the cage of his thoughts, compelling him to confront whatever awaited him head-on. With undeniable certainty, he knew. Time had indeed stopped, but not for long. Chapter 4. The Missing Will. The estate's wailing wind was a shrill companion to the heavy silence that radiated within Lady Evangeline's room, where shadows clung to the corners like whispered secrets. Father Brown stood motionless at the threshold, the chilling air biting through his coat, every fiber of his being drawn into the gravitas of what lay ahead. The floorboards creaked beneath him, as though the house itself trembled in fear of what he might uncover. Outside, the storm raged, a violent chorus of thunder and distant cries, a tempest that felt almost sentient, lurking with sinister intent. "Father, must we?" Mary's whispers trembled, cutting through the oppressive atmosphere like the flicker of a candle threatened by a sudden draught. "It's been but a day since she was found." Her voice hung thick with dread, eyes darting nervously to the draped bed where Lady Evangeline once lay, her life reduced to an absence that now filled the room. Yet it was not the loss of life that unnerved Father Brown. It was the more sinister absence, a will that had ostensibly vanished into the folds of the night. "It is precisely that which drives us, my dear," Father Brown replied, his voice steady as he crossed into the chamber, drawn by an invisible force. The air smelled of lavender, stale and stagnant, like the settled dust of unspoken truths. He approached the ornate writing desk, its rich mahogany surface glistening darkly in the flickering candlelight. "There are matters that linger like shadows, and shadows are known to deceive." As he rummaged through stacks of papers, every rustle seemed amplified in the eerie stillness. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass in their frames like a wounded animal. Scattered notes and hastily penned letters were strewn about, the words blurred and forgotten. Then, amidst the chaos, he discovered a ledger, its pages crisp and well-kept, detailing all manner of transactions concerning Lady Evangeline's estate. Father Brown's fingertips traced the ink, searching not just for facts, but for intent. "Father, please, I don't wish to disturb her belongings." Mary's protest felt like an echo, reverberating against the oppressive silence. "It frightens me. We are not privy to these secrets." "Secrets are only frightening until they are understood," he reasoned, speaking with quiet authority. His keen eyes thinned as they poring over the entries, dates, names, and amounts written with a precise hand, but it was one unassuming notation that caught his breath. "Oh, what do we have here?" He leaned closer, the shadows drawing him in. A meeting recorded 3 days prior, with a signature at the end that sent a shiver down his spine. Lord Ashby. "Curious indeed," he murmured, dismissing Mary's concerns. What weight does that name carry? Suddenly, a sudden clap of thunder crashed outside, rattling the windows, and in that moment of distraction, Mary stepped closer, her breath hitching as she leaned over his shoulder. I saw him yesterday before they found her father. He seemed distracted, almost frantic. Distracted or hiding. The implication hung heavy between them. Did he speak to you? No, but there was something. He had his hands full, with a box adorned with jewels. She hesitated, her gaze diverting to the floor as if a truth too heavy to bear pressed upon her chest. I thought it merely his own business. A conversation withheld, and now the jewels are gone. Vanished into the depths of secrecy, Father Brown muttered, carefully folding the ledger and sliding it aside. But we require more than whispers and shadows. These possessions still shelter truths. With nimble fingers, he dug deeper into the various drawers, scouring for signs of the will that might reveal the powers at play in this web of betrayal and greed. Every document holds a story, he asserted to Mary, who stood half in fear, half in curiosity behind him. Each signature gripped by its own fate. But before long, the search devolved into futility. Among the correspondence, there was no trace of the will, no divine document to clarify the true intentions of Lady Evangeline, whose treasures were the talk of the town, coveted by both friends and foes. It is odd, he confessed quietly, as he straightened, brushing the dust from his trousers, to unsettle so many after a lifetime of gathering only to vanish in the wake of one's passing. Something is deeply askew. As Father Brown absorbed the gravity of the situation, a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye diverted his attention. He turned, and the door creaked open wider, revealing the taut figure of Lord Ashby himself, his visage stained with an intensity that cut through the anticipation in the air. I need to speak with you, he declared, each word laced with urgency. Do enter, my lord, Father Brown gestured, urging him further into the room where the air seemed electrified with unrelenting tension. I was just examining certain papers. Ashby's pallor intensified as he stepped gingerly over the threshold, a haunting shadow eclipsing his features. I trust you haven't found anything? Not yet, Father Brown replied, scrutinizing him closely. But the need for understanding beckons. I assure you, Ashby interjected, his voice tightening. Everything I sought was above board. Lady Evangeline and I, a partnership of necessity, or perhaps something more? Father Brown's gaze bore into his, digging deeper into a truth he believed was about to surface. Alas, it becomes more plausible that the missing will is at the heart of all this chaos. The storm outside howled louder, as if responding to the charged conversation within, the wind shrieking through cracked panes, fraying nerves and unraveling composure. The will is merely a piece of parchment, Ashby said defiantly, yet the tension threading through his tone was unmistakable. Her treasures have a life of their own beyond inheritance. Father Brown took a step closer, his instincts honed, reading the deflection in Ashby's posture. Life of their own, or the desires of those who would chase them. He paused, allowing the air to thicken. It seems we all have much to safeguard, do we not? With a sudden movement, Ashby's hand gripped somewhat protectively at his collar, his expression shifting from feigned assurance to concealed panic. You must understand, this is more than what it appears. In that moment, the tension snapped like a taut string, and with a shout, a thunderous knock echoed once more on the door, pulling all presence towards the reverberating wood. Father Brown exchanged glances with Mary and then back at Ashby, who now seemed to tremble at the prospect of whatever was outside. Just as the door creaked open with a groan, the sound of shattering glass erupted from below, the storm spilling forth its fury into the hallowed halls. Father Brown grasped tightly at the arm of the desk, his heart quickening, as the realization struck him whatever lay ahead was about to unveil all hidden intentions, and perhaps even an unexpected scapegoat. And then, amidst the chaotic rattle of the storm and the sharp gasp of those in the room, there came a voice that cut through the cloak of impending calamity, a voice that possessed an ire and clarity, calling into the dark void with accusations that could bind souls to guilt. There is no escaping justice. Someone will pay for what has occurred here. As fear rooted them in place, Father Brown felt the shadows once more encroach, promising that the truth, however hidden, was about to surface, a truth mightier and more consuming than the tempest itself. As the violent crack of thunder shattered the air, he stepped back, instinct urging him to brace for the tornado of revelations unfolding around him, aware that fate had once again taken its turn, and in the storm's eye, amongst the terrified faces, gave a chilling feeling that order would not be restored until the last secrets were extracted, whatever form they may take. Chapter 5. The Portrait's Gaze. The instant Father Brown peered into the dim hallway, a frigid current swept past him, as if the very air sought to expel the sins of the past. An unexpected crash echoed down the corridor, the sound of wood splintering perhaps, followed immediately by a distant cry, echoing like the spectres of long-forgotten memories, clawing to be heard. Heart racing, he stepped into the shadows, guided by the flickering candlelight that danced like anxious spirits against the peeling wallpaper. It was in this hushed gloom that his gaze fell upon an old family portrait hanging crookedly on the wall. The frame cracked and dust-ridden, but the light caught the painted eyes, rendering them alive with a haunting glare that held depths of emotion long since buried. "There's something amiss," he murmured, more to himself than to Mary, who lingered cautiously behind him, her breath caught in her throat, paralyzed by a mixture of awe and trepidation. As the storm outside continued to batter against the estate like a lost soul seeking solace, Father Brown felt a prickle of unease tingle at the nape of his neck. Despite the storm's furor, there was an unnerving silence within the shadows, the kind of silence that begs for revelation, awaiting the uncovering of secrets wrapped tightly in the fabric of deceit. He examined the portrait more closely, the eyes glinting ominously, as if they were holding a grudge against the world, or perhaps against the family members, who had betrayed the legacy embedded within the canvas. Lady Gertrude, a distant relative who had faded from memory yet loomed here eternally, seemed to glare with the jealousy of one who had been overlooked, snubbed by a life overshadowed by wealth. "Why does she look so displeased?" Mary ventured, stepping forward as if drawn towards some dark magnetism. Her skepticism about delving into the estate's history resurfaced, but was now overshadowed by an unsettling curiosity. "Displeased, or warning," Father Brown replied. "Portraits do not merely capture likenesses, they ensnare emotions, truths, and sometimes unsolved mysteries. Lady Gertrude may have known far more than we assume." As he turned to investigate further, something caught his eye, a small glimmer on the floor beneath the portrait, half concealed in a shadow. He knelt, time bending, as he reached to pick up an item long obscured by dust, a delicate cufflink, its surface reflecting the dim light that fought through the storm. It bore the crest of the family, but this particular piece was tarnished, almost as if it had been intentionally hidden, or worse, neglected. "This belongs to Lord Ashby," Father Brown noted aloud, gazing at the insignia with discerning eyes. "What would it be doing here?" Mary asked, her voice tremulous as she grasped the weight of the situation. "Ah, that is the question, isn't it?" he said knowingly, his thoughts racing faster than the tempest outside. "Perhaps Ashby's connection to Lady Evangeline ran deeper than we have been shown. Jealousy, resentment, such emotions often lurk in the shadows of wealth." His mind raced, weaving the implications into a tapestry of intrigue that felt suffocating in its complexity. The cufflink's presence here threatened to reshape his understanding of those involved. What had happened between Ashby and this estate? Forced by a need to uncover the coming frenzy, he summoned the courage that only instinct and faith could furnish. "We must confront him, Mary," he stated, and moved toward the staircase, the wood groaning beneath him, as if alive with discontent. But as they climbed higher, another thunderous crash rippled through the house, causing them both to pause, the reverberations crawling up their spines. Mary's hand clutched his arm tightly, and Father Brown turned back to the portrait, its eyes unyielding, still focused on him, as if harbingers of the truth soon to be unearthed. After a fleeting moment of silence, wrapped around them like fog, a low whisper broke through. "Father," Mary began, cutting through the tension, her voice quaking, "what if they aren't merely shadows?" "Then we shall shed light upon them," he replied, forcing calm into the storm that brewed between them. As they approached the end of the corridor, Father Brown remembered a time-worn family tale about Lady Gertrude's fierce temper, rumored to have ignited feuds that lingered in the annals of history, whispering against the ears of family gatherings. But alongside her came tales of envy, a resentment that could bubble over like two boiling pots opposing each other, leading to resentment among heirs. Each knock, pop, and rustling leaf carried an echo of animosity buried with those who had come before. Suddenly, the door to Lord Ashby's study burst open, slamming against the wall with a cacophony that drowned out the storm's fury. The figure of Ashby stood framed against the entry, drenched and wild-eyed, the tension radiating from him palpable, as if he were the storm personified. "I have done nothing wrong," he shouted, voice cracking under pressure, as if the shadows themselves had spoken through him. "Gentlemen, do not quarrel yet. There's much at stake," Father Brown interjected smoothly, meeting Ashby's accusing glare with unfaltering resolve. "I've seen her," Ashby spat, voice trembling, saturated with disbelief. She haunts me, that cursed portrait. She knows I was there." His words spiraled from panic into confession, darting around the room like sparrows desperately seeking refuge from the tempest outside. A crash of thunder punctuated his declaration as it roared through the halls, vibrating the very foundations of the manor. Father Brown's heart quickened, sensing the emergence of a dreadful truth, like a coiled serpent, ready to strike. "Ashby, what did you do?" "Nothing," he protested, but the tremor underlying his bravado gave him away. "What did that portrait reveal to you while you cornered her on that stormy night? Was it of past wrongs or merely buried secrets?" Each question dug deeper, unraveling the fear-soaked fabric of Ashby's bravado. Before Ashby could respond, the ominous painting seemed to shimmer, the unwavering gaze shifting with a sinister clarity, the candlelight flickering ominously beneath its darkened frame. Just then, a loud crash shattered the air, a window blown open, rain torrents cascading across the floor in a tumultuous race, scattering papers and memories. In the chaotic aftermath, a scream pierced the thickening air. "There, in the study, she's come for justice," Ashby shrieked, stepping back as sheets fluttered like phantom wings across the once static room. As thin tendrils of dread wound around Father Brown's thoughts, he turned slowly to where the now ruined portrait hung once again, eyes glimmering with energy as it portrayed more than mere paint. It held within it the staining echo of family sins and retribution. Everything he believed began to morph into a twisted narrative with each beat of his heart. And from the corners of the room, around the flurry of chaos, Father Brown caught sight of something that sent chills down his spine. A dagger protruding from the draped cover of the desk, glittering with the wet sheen of rain. The realization struck him hard enough that he staggered, breath hitching as he understood. The past had not merely been waiting, it had clawed its way back, and the time for answers was now, full of fears and terrible truths, hungry to spill forth into the chaos of the present. "Someone is about to pay dearly," Father Brown intoned, his voice low, echoing off the walls as the shadows lengthened. "And this time, it won't be lost to history." And thus, just as the storm broke anew with a violent fury of thunder and lightning, revealing the outline of figures in the shadows, Father Brown's heart raced as the realization dawned anew. The portrait bore witness, and its gaze was not merely one of accusation, but a herald of vengeance unleashed. Chapter 6. The Ink-Stained Letter. A sudden cry shattered the air, echoing like a wailing banshee through the gravel-strewn corridors of Ashby Manor, an arresting sound amid the pelting rain that battered the windows as if trying to invade the very sanctum of hidden truths. Father Brown sprang forward, his heart racing, conviction firing him onward as he followed the anguished wail that curled around the corners of the mansion like mist, wrapping its tendrils around his conscience and pulling him deeper into the shadows. In the dim light of flickering candles, he could scarcely catch his breath, adrenaline coursing through him like electric lightning as he bore witness to the chaos unfolding before him. Mary caught up to him just as they reached the threshold of Lady Evangeline's study, where the heavy oak door stood ajar, creaking ominously against the backdrop of crashes and colliding winds. The scent of damp wood mingled with something sharper, an earthy tang of desperation and fear that wafted through the opening, yet it was not the storm which churned anxious energy within him. Rather, it was the unmistakable heaviness of something lost hovering in the air, an epistle of melancholy waiting to be unleashed. "Father Brown," Mary's voice quavered, suddenly ghostly as she ventured into the space, the flickering shadows leaping across the intricately woven tapestries of history that clung to the walls. The sight erupted in front of her like a ghastly tableau. Scattered papers lay in disarray across the study's polished floor, each one perhaps a remnant of countless deliberations and promises broken. Beneath the somber surface, the storm's fury outside seemed to dissolve into the rending silence within. The room, thick with the echoes of histories worth telling, but also with whispers that craved suppression. Then, amidst the torn remnants, he saw it, a crumpled letter, ink smudged and stained, like the story of regret that unfolded before him. Father Brown knelt beside the parchment, slipping his fingers over its surface while the thunder cracked madly overhead. The letter suggested haste, a farewell perhaps hastily torn from the writer in a moment of turmoil. "Father, is that—" Mary's voice trailed off, inhaling sharply as she too noted the urgency clinging to the letter. The handwriting, though ink-stained and smeared with desperation, still carried a familiar flair, one that spoke of elegance crumbling beneath chaotic pressure. "It belongs to Lady Evangeline," he murmured, dissecting the familiar curl of her script, a lush invitation that suddenly transposed into an anxious plea. These inscriptions bear the weight of a revelation waiting to spring forth. What does it say? With careful diligence, Father Brown brushed the moisture from the letter's edges. The words were gaunt and riddled with darkness. Glancing over them, one by one, "I thought him a friend as years went by," he read aloud, his voice lingering in the confines of the storm. "But friendship can twist into shadows, the envy that lurks." Mary leaned closer, her breath hitching, as the tempest outside collided with the shroud clinging to the room. "What envy? Who does she refer to?" "I suspect a secret alliance, perhaps one built around nefarious motivations. Her farewell may elucidate the unspeakable. A betrayal, an unveiling," Father Brown whispered, piecing together the shattered fragments of their story, aware that these inked words shifted ever so slightly into a place of malice and unresolved histories. "Then it leads to Lord Ashby," Mary interjected, her brow furrowing into a manifest of confusion. "He has been frenetic since we arrived. Did she realize something? Did he threaten her?" An unsettling thought struck Father Brown, a spark of revelation that knotted his stomach. What if it wasn't just him? The connections run deeper, like roots entwined within twisted soil, concealed yet central. Layers of familial betrayal pulling them all into anguish. As if summoned by this unsettling conclusion, a heavy footfall sounded from the entryway, making both Mary and Father Brown shiver involuntarily. The creaking door swung open, and Lord Ashby, still dripping from the storm that racked the manor outside, stormed into the room with a haunted expression, his eyes stark and glistening like wide saucers of uncontained horror. "What are you doing here?" he barked, tension thickening the equilibrium of the room. "You're meddling in things best left alone." With a composed yet resolute demeanor, Father Brown stood his ground, brandishing the ink-stained letter like a talisman against the encroaching shadows. "There are truths buried here, Lord Ashby, secrets deeply rooted in this house. Lady Evangeline's words—" "Her words," he spat, his bravado faltering as an ashen pallor seized his complexion. "There's more you don't understand. None of you do." "Then share with us, Lord Ashby," Father Brown pressed, his voice an unyielding current against the tide of emotion, threatening to wash them all away. "What lies beneath the surface? What spectral echo haunts you?" "All of it. The portrait, the tempest, the blood. They all know." Ashby pressed his hands to his temples, and for a fleeting moment, Father Brown glimpsed vulnerability, the rawness behind the masquerade, the fear rooted not only in villainy, but in pain. "To flee," Ashby continued, his voice a hollow whisper that clashed against thunder, "is to be hunted. To stay is to invite destruction." His outburst hung in the air, laden with an invisible weight that threatened to suffocate them all. Father Brown's mind raced. The intricate knot of motives began to unravel, but one question remained awash in uncertainty. Lady Evangeline's cries for justice were lost somewhere in this storm-laden hall of secrets. "Tell me, Ashby." Father Brown's gaze pierced through the chaos as if seeking light in the darkest of places. "What were you hiding?" Just as Ashby opened, his mouth a sudden crack, a deafening, sharp snap from the adjoining room where the shadows appeared to swirl into existence, an armed figure materialized, obscured momentarily by the shapes of the swirling storm and sheets of rain. The figure emerged fully into view, a revolver drawn and glistening in the half-light, wrapped within the shroud of suspicion. "Step away from him," the figure shouted, stunning the trio with renewed fear. Father Brown's mind catalogued the events, a coiling suspension of desperation, the chance of protection unraveling amid the storm. He dared not move as dread nipped at the edges of his resolve. Whatever truth had yet to tether itself within the depths of ink-stained paper and turbulent emotions now seemed moments away from erupting, if only he could stave off the unknown. "Do you truly wish to shoot for answers?" Father Brown called out, parrying the imminent plummet into chaos. Yet even as he spoke, the storm raging outside burst in a howl of wind, the hissing rain blending with the fatal urgency that bore down upon them all. This was far from finished. The darkness would reveal itself, and as long as shadows continued their whispered dance, they were but pawns on a grand chessboard, one where the final move had yet to be made. Chapter 7. Secrets of the Collapsed Arch. The storm shrieked like a banshee, rattling the very bones of Ashby Manor as Father Brown stumbled backward, heart pounding against the tempestuous chaos that enveloped him. The heavy crack of thunder harmonized with a distant, chilling wail, leaving him grasping for clarity amid the swirling shadows of doubt and dread. Above the gale, he caught an eerie glimmer from the dagger on the desk, its metallic sheen slick with rain. Yet another storm raged. Behind him, rooted deep within the shadows of the manor's history, daring him to probe its secrets further. "Father, look!" Mary's voice sliced through the swirling confusion, drawing his gaze to an archway on the verge of collapse, half hidden in darkened corners where the candlelight flickered anxiously like a broken heartbeat. Without thinking, he advanced towards it, compelled by an inexplicable tug of intuition, paired with the desperation of the tempest outside that seemed to whisper of lost truths, lurking just beyond the threshold. Pushing aside a tattered curtain, swaying like a ghost in the storm, Father Brown knelt before the crumbling arch and discovered it bore an unsettling fracture, splintering like a family's trust, long before they had come to roost in these haunted halls. As he pressed a hand against the cold stone, an unsettling sensation coursed through him. It was as if history resonated within the very walls, begging to be unearthed. "What are you doing?" Mary asked, her voice quaking with apprehension as though she shared in the unearthing of past sufferings. "Something is hidden," he murmured, his fingers brushing against the arch in hopes of revealing what lay dormant beneath the layers of dust and dilapidation. Before he could utter another word, a sharp click echoed ominously through the air, and a section of the wall shifted slightly, revealing a narrow crawl space that exhaled memories long suffocated by neglect. With a determined nod to Mary and a quick glance over his shoulder to ensure Lord Ashby remained preoccupied with his own storm of emotions, Father Brown felt an urgent thrill surge through him as he crawled into the darkness. The air thickened. Dust motes danced chaotically in the dim light until perceptible shapes began to emerge, a series of forgotten relics, stained photographs, and faded letters huddled together as if yearning for a witness to their histories. "What did you find?" Mary whispered from the lip of the crawl space. Her curiosity piqued, but her instincts cautioning her to remain vigilant. The atmosphere around them crackled as if alive with past grievances that clawed at him from the shadows. This space, it holds the weight of a family costumed in secrets. Father Brown retrieved an aged photograph from beneath a pile of debris, its surface marred like a ghostly visage, staring back at him through the haze of time. Here's Evangeline, older than I remember, perhaps a decade past, yet the smile does naught to mask the shadows swirling beneath. It's a family portrait, Mary reasoned as she peered over his shoulder, frowning. But look at the corner. There's another figure, one obscured, almost as if they're meant to be forgotten. Precisely, he replied, studying the image further, tracing the outlines of the unrecognizable shadow. A relationship fraught with darkness, perhaps. It shimmers with treachery. The fateful decisions sealed within this manner do not escape unscathed. But there's more. As he rummaged through the forlorn treasures of yesteryear, a letter tucked beneath the crumpled photograph caught his eye, its ink smeared, yet undeniably crafted with turbulent care. He unfolded it cautiously, reading the evidence of conflict infused in ink, fragmented yet bursting with emotion. Beneath the facades we wear, remember our blood does not betray. Father, Mary's voice wove through the silence, trembling with concern. What does it say? Confession often arrives in unfamiliar strands. He frowned, absent-mindedly feeling the texture of the paper in his hand. The writing trembled with urgency, yet it spoke of unity, a family glaring at the brink of a chasm, torn between loyalty and betrayal. Before Father Brown could speak further, a sudden noise quaked through the air outside, a harrowing crash that sent their hearts racing once again. "What is that?" Mary exclaimed, her wide eyes mirroring his dread. Perhaps we should investigate," he suggested, holding the letter protectively as if it were a charm against the unfolding danger. "But we cannot leave these relics unexamined. The ache carved into their fibers draws even the lost back to reconcile their pain." Just as he turned to speak further with Mary, a garbled cry surged and cut through the air, almost like a lamentful soliloquy echoing from the shadows beyond the crawling space. "No, you cannot," came a voice he recognized, too grief-stricken to belong to Lord Ashby, but a resolute echo of Evangeline's spirit, demanding justice for forgotten sins. Something inside him twitched with the fury of unfolding memories, the knife of fear piercing deeper. "Something's wrong. I can nearly taste the reckoning." A fierce, glimmering thought flickered in his mind, born of intuition as murky as the shadows surrounding them. They are trying to bury it all, every sin, every sin's offspring. As Father Brown prepared to rise from the dust, feeling the weight of the turmoil around him, he threw a final glance into the crawl space. It came as no shock when he realized the other half of the photograph, the inscrutable face turned away from the light, bore a striking resemblance to a figure he could not quite place, a shadow from the past, once connected to Lady Evangeline's hauntings. Suddenly, the walls of the room seemed to breathe with tension as a sharp crack sounded once more, a crashing echo reverberating through the halls, this time mingling with an agonized scream from Ashby. The profound clarity of understanding washed over Father Brown, illuminating the path he needed to unveil. "Father!" Mary gripped his arm, her voice steady, yet laced with a shaking urgency. "We can't stay here. Something is unraveling." Yes, but before he could frame the sense of urgency within the depths of his own thoughts, something dark loomed at the mouth of the crawl space, a figure, indistinct but laden with sinister intent, emerging from the blur of shadow. Brandishing an ancient, swirling relic, the very thing that had ensnared the Ashby family in a tapestry of violence for generations. "Back away," the figure growled, panic seeping through their words, a warning intertwined with desperation. It was a decision made under duress, as Father Brown realized that, at last, the past was not merely a whisper. It had taken on a form, ready to reclaim its hold on an unwilling present. The storm outside howled, mingling with the cacophony of emotions that threatened to break the very foundation of truth within the manor. As the chamber erupted with the sound of colliding wills, Father Brown braced for the tempestuous truth that was about to erupt, the echoes of secrets buried deep now clawing their way back into the open air, wrapping around them like the very storm outside. He had but a moment to deduce truth from illusion before the storm would render his pursuit of justice impossible. A single breath before the world turned irrevocably dark. Chapter 8. The Confession in the Garden. The moment Father Brown stepped into the garden, the air shifted with an oppressive weight, a sudden gust convulsing through the gnarled branches overhead, scattering rain-soaked leaves around him like remnants of fleeting dreams. The faint scent of earth turned to a pungent bitterness as an ominous roll of thunder echoed in the distance, accompanied by the unsettling whistle of the wind, almost as if the very hedges were lamenting secrets long buried. He was not alone. A shadow loomed at the edge of the wilting flower bed, where a solitary rose, once radiant in crimson, drooped under the weight of despair, its petals glistening with moisture but stained with the sorrow of what could have been. With an instinct honed by years spent untangling the tangled webs of human nature, Father Brown approached the figure, aware that this encounter might unravel yet another layer of the intricate mystery he had been drawn into. As he neared, the shadow resolved into a familiar form. It was Lady Evangeline, her countenance pale and strained, her eyes a stormy reflection of the weather above. "Father Brown," she intoned, her voice quivering with an intoxicating mix of fear and resolve. "He is close, closer than we dare believe, and I fear I will not be able to stop him." The weight of her words anchored him, and he took a steadying breath, his heart pounding like the drum of fate in the torrential backdrop. "What do you mean, Lady Evangeline?" he pressed, keeping his tone even, aware that the garden's beauty stood in stark contrast to the tempest brewing within her. "Who is he?" As thunder cracked overhead, she seemed to tremble, the last strands of her composure fraying in the wild winds. "Lord Ashby, it is his desperation that has clouded his judgment," she confessed, glancing over her shoulder, as if the shadows themselves were eavesdropping on their guarded exchange. "Even now, he drags our family's legacy through the mire, blinded by his need for power, for control." Her eyes turned, searching for the truth amid the tangled undergrowth of their shared past. Father Brown, in that moment, weighed her words carefully. "But desperation can lead to violence, my lady. Are you saying he intends to act, to harm?" A sudden rustle from the underbrush sent cold shivers racing down his spine, and for an instant he caught a fleeting scent of gunpowder intermingled with the dampness of the age-old soil. "It is more than just that," she murmured, the shadows pooling beneath her silhouette, making her appear ethereal, yet dangerously so. "Inside Ashby Manor, there is something that holds him captive. The relic." "The ancient artifact?" he questioned, tightening his grip on his umbrella as raindrops began to splatter against it, mixing with the strings of their fateful conversation. Revealing its position would be an oversight that could topple the teetering balance of the evening's revelations. "Yes," Yes, it binds him to the sins of his ancestors. He thinks he can control its power, but it consumes him. We cannot allow this to continue, Father. The urgency in her voice vibrated through the atmosphere, igniting an understanding of profound worry, one that leapt far beyond the realm of mere superstition. And yet, Father Brown observed, kneeling before the dying rose, fingers brushing against its fragile petals, isn't it often those who cling to the past that end up strangling their own future? You speak with such passion, but tell me, what do you seek, Lady Evangeline? Justice or revenge? Her gaze fixed on him, something flickering in her eyes. I seek the truth, she replied, heedless of the shadows that encroached around them. None among us are innocent, Father. Each member of the Ashby family bears their cross, stained by choice and consequence. But Lord Ashby intends to trap us all in an eternal cycle of suffering, and I cannot be part of that darkness. An enigmatic silence descended, shattered only by the plaintive wail of the wind racing through the garden, as if echoing the very heartache woven into their conversation. Father Brown narrowed his eyes, contemplating her fervent expression, searching for any hint of deception lurking beneath the surface of her poignant plea. Your honesty is commendable, my lady, but I fear paradox and motives still cling to your soul. I cannot help but wonder, if your truth lies in part with this darkness, what else might you desire to conceal? The color drained from her cheeks, and in that moment, the air crackled with unspoken fears, secrets spiraling precariously. What more could I possibly hide? She exclaimed, her desperation surfacing like a barricade against the storm. I am a prisoner of this fate, just as you are. If you could just see it. Father Brown frowned, pondering the depths concealed within the swirling tumult of their discussions. Hidden amidst the turbulence of the storm, there lay the tension of a poignant truth, a discovery yet to surface amidst the certainty of betrayal. Then let us speak plainly, Lady Evangeline. What if there exist associations and loyalties that weave tighter than familial bonds? The wind violently lashed at the garden, pulling at the remnants of the wilting rose. It seemed, in that very moment, as if nature herself bore witness to their entwined destinies, the petals rustling in restless agreement. But before Lady Evangeline could respond, the ground shook beneath them. A deep rumble resonated, like the angry growl of the heavens above, a harbinger of a threat neither had anticipated. "Run!" she screamed, her eyes wide with terror as the world around them began to erupt. From the depths of the manor came an agonizing crash, the sound echoing through the garden, signaling an impending upheaval of all they had sought to understand. Instinct seized him, and he turned, his instincts sharpened. Yet before he could make sense of their flight, Father Brown barely had time to grab Evangeline's wrist, feeling the cold cling of panic as another thunderous clash opposed the trembling earth. In the chaos, she fell against him, a whisper slipping past her lips like the last breath of a dying flame. The truth. The truth within the garden must be uncovered before it's too late. Just then, a peculiar glint caught his eye from beneath the roots of the rosebush, a flash of silver entwined in the damp, dark earth. A delicate necklace, encrusted in emeralds, but its distressing calling card was the pendant, shaped like a dagger that nestled deep into the heart of Ashby Manor's secrets. And with it came the realization that the night was far from over. A pivotal truth awaited. The garden was about to erupt with confessions that would change the course of destiny. He glanced toward Lady Evangeline, stepping back from the chaos, his heart pounding like the percussive assault of the thunder above. Resolved to uncover what lay at the roots of their shared entanglements before it all spiraled into irrevocable despair. But before he could act, a new sound emerged, a crackle of footsteps, wary but deliberate, heralding the approach of an unseen figure. As the storm continued to howl, the garden now lay haunted, not just by the past, but entangled with the imminent promise of violent reckoning. The shadows stood coiled at the precipice, waiting for their moment to strike, as Father Brown sensed something extraordinary within, the tension rising, a realization that the true heart of the Ashby legacy was about to unveil itself, and it would come with a cost. Chapter 9. The Puppet Master's Strings. The air was charged with ominous tension when a scream, shattering and primal, pierced through the echoing thunder, cutting through the chaos that enveloped Ashby Manor. Father Brown stood frozen, heart racing, as the distant wail ricocheted ominously against ancient walls entwined with decades of silence. The flickering candles cowered in the stained glass shadows, their flames sputtering against the turbulence of history gnawing at the present. The storm outside unfurled like an enraged beast, and with each rumble he felt the pull of dark secrets edging toward release. "Father!" The voice belonged to Mary, frantic and breathless as she burst into view, her clothes clinging to her in wet strands, her eyes wide and frightened. "We must find the others. The storm revealed more than we anticipated." He barely had time to nod in agreement when a cold gust swept through the room, extinguishing the flickering light and plunging them into the oppressive embrace of the night. As if summoned by the very shadows, figures began to emerge from doorways and corners, drawn into the maelstrom of fear and dread, a gathering of souls, each wearing the masks of familiar sorrow. "Lady Evangeline," Father Brown murmured, glancing around to gauge the gathered assembly. Her words linger like a mournful echo. The relic, it seems, is no mere artifact, but a symbol of despair and unyielding chains. He clenched his hands, feeling a surge of urgency as he pieced together the fractured narrative. Who screams amidst the raging storm? It was Lord Ashby, appearing from a side door, his face pale and drawn, eyes glistening with the reflection of flickering candles, now resurrected. "Is it true? Have they come for—" "Unhand that, Father." He lunged at Father Brown, voice suddenly both harsh and pleading, as the priest cradled something silver. A small, ornate box, embossed with strange symbols that throbbed like the very heart of the storm. "I find it hard to believe this was merely an accident, my lord," Father Brown replied, holding the box closer just as the room filled with tension, the candles flickering once more. "This was hidden among your family's ruins. Its significance leads me to believe it may provide answers we so desperately seek." "Answers?" Ashby's voice dropped to a whisper, the very fabric of his composure unraveling. "What if the answers hold truths we are not ready to bear?" Amidst the dawning realization of their quandary, Mary stepped forward, her resolve firm against the tidal waves of fear. "We are all bound by our ghosts, my lord. Perhaps it is time to confront these specters before they spill into the world beyond." Furtive glances flitted among the gathered assembly, and Father Brown noted something more. The subtle shift in Lady Evangeline's demeanor, her green eyes both bright and shadowed. "Trust must be earned, Father," she interjected softly, "but it is not my trust we must question. It is Lord Ashby's own allegiance to the past that keeps these truths chained. Chained? Ashby echoed incredulously, anger rippling through his voice. You paint me a villain when all I seek is to protect my family's legacy. By perpetuating its pain? Father Brown interjected, taking a careful step toward him. You wield these secrets like weapons, but against whom do you contend? Your own kin? Or is there a darker hand guiding your actions? A palpable tension blanketed the room, every soul caught in the interlude as if a breath had been held in anticipation of revelation. In that silence, Father Brown honed into the subtle clues, those delicate phrases unraveling the fabric of alibis that cloaked hidden motives. The mark of soot smeared on Ashby's collar, the slight hesitation in Lady Evangeline's speech, the fleeting glance shared between Ashby and a figure now slinking behind the half-shadowed alcove. "What are you hiding?" he pressed, the intensity of the storm outside reflecting within him. "Who else stands to gain from this torment?" "You presume too much, Father," Ashby snapped, shifting back toward the shadows, his voice growing brittle. "What you think is manipulation is merely survival. I, too, am bound by what I cannot free myself." "Then tell us," Mary cried, the rawness of her plea snapping through the tension like dry kindling. "Release us from this torment." In the distance, thunder erupted with renewed vigor, shaking dust from the rafters. "Betrayal knows no kinship," a new voice called forth, stern, yet almost mocking, one that belonged to the dim silhouette emerging from the thickened shadows. "And as much as you believe you can sift truths from fiction, it is I who controls this narrative." All heads turned sharply as the newcomer stepped forth, revealing a visage cloaked beneath the shadow of their own fears. A young man with sunken eyes, betraying both panic and a knowing depth. "Once the puppet strings are cut, what remains of your delicate dance of deception?" Father Brown's heart raced, a sudden clarity enveloping him as he connected the threads of suspicion swirling about Ashby Manor. "Maximilian, but I thought you disappeared." "Disappeared?" he echoed bitterly, tossing aside the curtain of secrecy. "It was only the shadows waiting. But why bother masking their intentions if you are all too blind to see? The relic is merely the hint. The true darkness lies within the manipulator's grasp. You must realize the threat surpasses even the whispers of the past." As his words hung like the haunting echo of distant thunder, reality morphed around Father Brown, revealing shadows cloaked tighter in webs than he dared to uncover. He sensed the unraveling, a creeping understanding that coiled around the heart of Ashby's legacy. But within that moment, a fierce crack shattered the air. A gunshot rang clear, echoing through the manor like the death knell of their unraveling truths. The presence of the unseen trembled with undeniable menace, and Father Brown, caught between the devouring darkness and the fragile hope of illumination, stared into the abyss where all innocence dissolved. The final strings of deception had tightened, and with a heart pounding like a war drum, he realized they were no longer the battlers of their own destinies. They had become prey, drawn into the web of an unseen puppet master. Chapter 10. The Night of Revelation. The gunshot rang out like the tolling of a death knell, reverberating through the stone corridors of Ashby Manor, slicing through the heavy air and drawing everyone into a fearful hush, the kind where hearts stuttered, gasps turned to whispers, and shadows lingered at the edges of the flickering candlelight. Father Brown felt the blood drain from his face, a cold chill spreading through him as he scanned the room, his mind racing back to the narrative he had woven from the frayed threads of truth and deception, now grasping at once new shapes amidst the dread. Mary's eyes were wide, reflecting the pale glow of the candlelight, and in that instant, the innocence he had cherished in her appeared to quiver under the weight of realities she had not yet confronted. Who was it? Lord Ashby's voice cut through the enveloping silence, tight with fear and barely concealed despair. He stepped backward, the shadows swallowing him momentarily like a phantom, those frantic movements betraying a mind overtaken by panic. Are we all to perish beneath this storm? The relic calls forth our darkest haunts, not our deepest truths. Father Brown's attention snapped into focus as his instincts took charge. The fragmented tableau, the impulsive fleeing of Maximilian into the murky shadows, and the undercurrents swirling around Ashby Manor felt destined to converge. "In truth, my lord," he began, his voice a steadying anchor amidst the tumult, "each of us bears both reflection and light. But the gunshot, an act made in trepidation. What if it was not merely an echo of betrayal, but an assertion of desperation?" The storm raged unabated outside, rain lashing against the cold panes, punctuated by the rumbling of thunder that felt like a chorus, mourning the secrets about to be unveiled. The wind howled through the cracked windows, and a shudder traveled through the assembly, shaking their resolve as they stood at a precipice. "This gunshot," he continued, gathering resolve, "could signify a target or perhaps a frightened attempt at silencing the truths that threaten to engulf us all." "Maximilian," Mary called out in urgent disbelief, her voice trembling, "you vanished. Why return now?" The young man's figure materialized from the alcoves, shadowy and disheveled, yet his eyes burned with a clarity that pierced through the veil of night. "Because," he said, his voice echoing with an intensity that resonated in the marrow of their fears, "the storm speaks. It howls to unveil our sins, and I alone know why. A darkness scuttles through the very heart of Ashby Manor, and it feasts upon the secret hatred we harbor." "Speak then," commanded Ashby, though his voice trembled beneath the weight of an unspeakable burden. "A family legacy, drenched in murk. Share your poison with us, if you must." "The dagger," Maximilian began, taking a step forward, his every word clinging to them like mist. "The one that sways even the strongest tide of loyalty. Do you not see? It rouses the demons lurking inside each of you. Evangeline holds the history of our downfall. Her presence is an omen." "A mere coincidence," Lady Evangeline snapped, her green eyes flashing with defiance, betraying fear only slightly veiled by anger. "You presume too much, Maximilian. I am not the harbinger you suggest." "But that necklace," he pressed, his voice rising with fervor. "It lies in your possession. Is it not meant to remain buried among the bones of our lineage? Each gem, a tear that weeps for lives taken, paths forsaken." Father Brown felt a tightening in his chest. He recalled the emerald necklace glimpsed in the garden, its sharp pendant a jest at their threaded histories. "What is the necklace's true tale?" he asked, weighted with understanding. "And how does it bind you all to this night?" "I wanted peace," Ashby interjected suddenly, his voice raw. "And if I must do plates of penance, I would rather cast stones on those who condemn me, but the relic is the chains I have forged." "Perhaps it is not the relic that binds you," Father Brown shot back, his calm facade barely concealing the fire that dwelt within. "Time and secrets wield more power than a symbolic trinket. Show me your wounds, Lord Ashby. for it is the blood of betrayal that seeps through our ties, painted in absent love, a facade crumbled by storms, both within and without. Did you fire upon Maximilian? Did you seek to end this tide of revelation? No. Ashby's hand flew to his throat as if it could silence the tumult rolling beneath his skin. I do not want to die. I never wished for bloodshed. Yet I cannot allow... Thunder cracked loudly once more outside, shaking the manor as the very air thickened with mounting dread. Someone is among us, a voice hissed from the shadows. All heads turned, panic reverberating through the air. It was not meant for Maximilian, but for you, Lord Ashby. What? Ashby stumbled back, panic etching deeper lines across his brow, while the others stood frozen, fear morphing into chaos. Quickly, father, Mary cried. There is no time. If you know the truth, unveil it. Before Father Brown could reply, a tense fizzle snapped at the edge of the mantel, drawing their eyes just as a second gunshot rang out, chaos erupting anew. He felt a strange mixture of horror and determination twist his stomach as he watched Lord Ashby recoil, his figure silhouetted against the tremors of candlelight. Who would dare? Father Brown demanded, his heart pounding, resolve hardening like iron. But in that split second, as he reached forward to steady Ashby, the threads of fate unraveled before him, revealing a most unexpected accomplice. To his growing horror, the flash of betrayal surged from the side, making the tethering darkness spin yet tighter. Maximilian lunged backward, eyes flashing with a betrayal that writhed beneath the surface, before the shadows swallowed him too. What identity remained within the walls of Ashby Manor, fragmented like glass, shattering the calm and inviting him into the heart of the storm they had yet to face? The night held its breath, and in the electric hum of anticipation, something dreadful lurked just beyond their ken. Chapter 11. The Shattered Illusion. The deafening crack of gunfire shattered the fragile veneer of sanity at Ashby Manor as Lord Ashby staggered backward, his form swallowed by the shadowy recesses of the candlelit hall. Outside, the tempest surged like a beast unleashed, the relentless rain drumming against the windows as if urging the darkness within to burst forth and consume them all. Father Brown's heart stilled in that electrifying moment, breath quickening as he felt the waves of dread ripple through his companions, weaving a tapestry of terror that pooled at their feet. The room ignited with panic, and their eyes darted toward the flickering light, enveloped in the weight of unsaid horrors looming in wait. "Maximilian!" Mary cried, her voice tinged with disbelief, reaching into the shadows where the young man had retreated, the faint glimmer of reason drowning in an abyss of chaos. "What have you done?" But the question hung lifeless, swallowed by the cacophony of thunder rolling like war drums overhead, as Father Brown forced himself to remain rooted, his mind flickering through the fragmented images and whispered truths that swirled densely about them. Within that paralysis echoed guitar strings of repression, each individual a tight note in the dissonant chord. They all had something hidden, something precariously tethered beneath their garbs of respectability, layered yet exposed, like oil upon the surface of a puddle. His gaze fell upon Lady Evangeline, whose aura of sophistication shimmered with a tremor of fear, eyes darting towards the alcoves, where danger lingered like a predator, keenly aware of its prey. "Father," she breathed, "could it be a ghost?" Her voice cracked like glass, and Father Brown turned to her, grasping the telltale signs of her discomfort and all she dared not say. Ghosts, my lady, are often the phantoms we conjure from our own guilt, he murmured, his voice threading through the tumult like a line of hope that had not yet frayed. As he searched the dark recesses, a memory aligned itself neatly within his mind, an innocuous detail hidden beneath layers of deception. A button, unfastened during the earlier storm of accusations, now fell like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the tangled truths. He recalled Maximilian's restlessness, the subtle twitch of his fingers, and now he could see the crumbling facade behind his bravado. Tell me, what is it that binds you all? And you, Maximilian, what is your true fear? Before the young man could respond through the impending veil, another figure burst forth from the shadows, a servant from the house, eyes wide and skin pale, as if fished from the sea of despair. Sir, we must leave at once. The storm is worse. We are not safe here. Their urgency pulled at the edges of reason, heightening tension, like string pulled taut before snapping. Father Brown straightened, sensing the fabric of the evening fading into uncertainty. But bowing to fear will not mend the fabric of betrayal, he replied, heart racing with the weight of revelation, balancing on the blade of suspicion. His eyes locked onto Lord Ashby, now finally vulnerable beneath the weight of accusations, desperately attempting to mask the shaking in his hands with false bravado. The relic may very well be lost amongst our fears. It means nothing, Ashby roared suddenly, fists clenching against the abyss, threatening to spill open beneath him. I do not wish to play the game of shadows any longer. I saw nothing. And yet you speak of ghosts, Brown observed keenly, each word a needle stitching together frayed edges. You are afraid of more than just the forces lurking in darkened corners, Lord Ashby. You fear the exposure of your hand. The resonance of that moment snapped through the dim air, morphing tension into an electric haze that crackled with both revelation and despair. Just then, a flash of light illuminated the room's edges, revealing the contours of undisguised emotions. The shivering line between innocence and guilt blurred within each face, Ashby's despair, Lady Evangeline's defiance, and Mary's confusion. As thunder roared again, their reflections flickered in the candlelight, each leaping to the fore, shrouded in roles they'd long played. Father Brown's mind raced, picking apart the jagged pieces of the evening's puzzle, eyes narrowing on the artifacts of their confrontation. Did Maximilian truly fire? He pondered, voice scarcely more than a whisper, as if naming the dread would lend it form. And what had he to gain from such folly? Is the storm only an echo of a deeper tempest raging within your household? Evangeline shifted, a spark igniting in her eyes. What are you implying, Father? Her tone was sharp, yet layered with something beyond mere confrontation, a deeper personal stake that lay beyond familial devastation. A crack of lightning lit her green eyes with unearthly fervor, illuminating a truth that threatened to slice straight through the heart of their present anguish, exposing a betrayal that lay coiled within her own past. The winds howled outside, as if echoing her unspoken fears. Perhaps it is time to calculate. What are you concealing beneath that necklace? Father Brown challenged, relentless and true. Our lineage is cursed not merely by the lineage of our blood, but by the sins we refuse to confess. Lady Evangeline, the key to understanding the night lies in your willingness to unlock its door. With that, silence descended upon them. A tremor suffused the air as Evangeline opened her mouth, but no words emerged, only silence bubbling over with pain. And yet before she could speak, a new sound broke, the sharpness of a knife sliding from its sheath, slicing through their tense air, the unmistakable glint of silver catching the light as they turned. Maximilian had stepped forth, eyes alight with the fire of betrayal, gripping the dagger he had unearthed, its edge gleaming with a promise of violence. You think you've cornered the truth, but the truth is more hideous than mere shadows by candlelight. I do not bear the sins of our clan. With a tightness in his heart, Father Brown stepped forward, arms outstretched. But it is the sins you claim that bind you, he implored, every word imbued with a warmth, battling the frigid shadows encroaching within. The air thickened, breaths caught in throat-straining uncertainty, hearts rallied beneath the bravado, waning like a lone candle's flame. And then, between wild truths and angry hearts, a door swung open into darkness, revealing a throne of secrets where the harbingers of chaos awaited. The sounds of the storm wove harmonies of danger, vibrating alongside the flutter of secrets buried deep, as if the very manor itself conspired against them. Who truly holds the dagger? Father Brown called out, voice taut like a tightrope about to snap, his resolve battling the grip of fear, knowing that the line between ally and enemy was drawn deeper than mere blood. Fight only with truth, for it is our only weapon against the unseen forces poised to strike. But just as silence fell, the dagger glinting ominously in the dim light, shadows expanded darker and broader. Another shot rang out into the night, echoing through the hollow halls, and those gathered teetered on the brink of their truths. One body fell, the darkness thickened, and a heart broke beneath the weight of an unanswerable question, hanging heavy like the storm over Ashby Manor. Everything they believed shattered as fate tightened its grip, leaving Father Brown standing at the nexus of chaos, racing against the emergence of a truth that could undo them all. Chapter 12. The Grace of Revelation. The chilling echo of a gunshot reverberated through Ashby Manor, shattering the very essence of sanity like glass breaking across a polished floor. Time seemed to stretch grotesquely as moments bled into seconds, each one thick with the tension of unspoken fears and unveiled truths. It was not merely the thunder outside that haunted the rafters, but the insidious dread creeping through the hearts of the gathered. A storm, both external and internal, ferocious and unforgiving. A pale light flickered across the room, revealing the terror-stricken faces lost in the smoky candlelight, as if the darkness itself conspired to keep their secrets hidden. Maximilian, Lady Evangeline's voice, a brittle whisper laced with desperation, reached out into the shadows where the young man had vanished, leaving in his wake a palpable void thick enough to drown in. Father Brown stepped forward, instinctively shielding the others with his presence, feeling both the weight of their collective terror and the urgency of the moment. The dagger that had glittered with malice now felt like a ghost, haunting the air between them, promising violence just as much as it hinted at revelation. Father Brown. Mary's voice broke through his thoughts, edged with a mixture of fear and determination. You must help us. The truth must surface before the shadows take us all. At her words, the flickering candle flames quivered, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls, and Father Brown felt an inkling of buried truths clawing at his consciousness. Feelings of betrayal manifest themselves in ways far more treacherous than a mere dagger or shattered glass, he murmured, scanning the faces around him like a painter with an unfinished canvas, searching for the colors yet to be revealed. Are we to cower in this mausoleum of secrets? Maximilian's voice slashed through the thick air, laced with accusation and bitterness. It is easier to condemn the shadows than to acknowledge the monster we've allowed to fester within. He stood wavering amidst the tumult, vulnerability breaking apart the bravado he had assumed like armor. Father Brown remained steady, reflecting on each creased forehead and narrowed eyes around him, stitching together the threads of deception that bound them tighter than the storm itself. Maximilian, he began softly, but with a conviction that resonated. The true monster does not lurk in the darkness outside, but rather in the hearts burdened by guilt. Has it not always been our sins that earn us our ghosts? A flicker of something, a flash of realization, crossed Lady Evangeline's features before she spoke. But would you accuse one of us? Would you suggest that we harbor malice? The tension shifted, like the wind lashing against the manor, each gust propelling them toward revelations, yet unventured. Guilt shrouds insight, my lady, Father Brown replied, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. He focused on the ornate necklace at her throat, its glint a stark contrast to the shadows playing around them. Every ornament may conceal a wound, hidden beneath layers of charm. What lies beneath yours? Evangeline's breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment she appeared unearthly, framed by shadows and the flickering light, both ethereal and anchored by the weight of unvoiced sorrows. You must understand, Father, she whispered, forcing the words through clenched teeth. We are bound by a legacy stained by the blood of our ancestors. We cannot flee its grasp. Before they could ponder her haunting words, another shot ripped through the air, visceral in its finality, inducing a collective gasp that echoed in their souls. A body fell, collapsing in a heap of pristine fabric, stained now with the price of buried sins, and in its stillness, a morbid clarity unfolded. No! Mary's scream mingled with the thunder, resonating in a crescendo of grief and shock as she knelt beside the fallen. Father Brown rushed forward, heart racing, crouching beside the lifeless form that lay shrouded by the weeping shadows. Lord Ashby, he breathed, the name scarcely escaping his lips before the weight of realization settled over him like the blackest night. The questions that had lingered escaped his tongue like desperate prayers. Who has committed this atrocity? I did not. Maximilian's voice became frantic, desperation twisting him like a fist gripping at the air. They sought to blame me, but I would never. It is too late for denials, dear Maximilian, Lady Evangeline cut in, her veneer of sophistication cracking like thin ice beneath a heavy weight. You have become a prisoner of the very truths you would suppress. In sealing your own shroud of guilt, you have compelled tragedy to sweep through our lives. Father Brown leveled a hard stare at their layered interactions, chaining them with his unwavering stare. And yet, does shame make a victim, or does it make a perpetrator? Each question sliced through the air like the lightning splintering within a roiling sky, forcing them to confront unuttered fears. He could feel fractured destinies tethered within the darkness, poised to leap toward an inevitable reckoning. A stifling silence descended amongst them, the wind rattling against the window panes like clamoring spirits desperate for release. In that suffocating moment of realization, a hidden disclosure echoed from beyond the threshold of the dimly lit room. A muffled sound, a cry bursting forth like a trapped creature escaping the confines of its cage. Father Brown turned abruptly, discerning the air shift with an urgency that rattled his convictions, certainty coiling tight in his heart. "Someone is coming," he exclaimed, realizing that the night's malevolence was far from finished. Shadows danced wickedly against the walls, flickering in the candle's dying breath, and anticipation held them rapt as the dread of an unseen creature loomed behind the ticking walls of their solemn sanctuary. Just seconds from silence, a figure flung open the heavy door with a force that reverberated through the air. "You cannot hide behind darkness any longer," the newcomer shouted, voice like thunder to a congregation caught in prayer. All eyes turned, hearts quickening to the brink of chaos. A revelation waited in the wings, poised to unearth the truth of Ashby Manor. And with a soul-splitting crack of thunder, the world around them exploded into fragments as the door swung wide, drawing a veil of nameless dread into their midst, unraveling the threads of fate as Father Brown squared his shoulders, prepared to meet the final tempest of revelation.